Welcome back to another episode of the Mentorship Podcast. We're going to be discussing the NBA today. Um, I'm Nishan, and joining me is my co-host Ayush. What are your thoughts on the NBA season so far, and Ayush?
So it's been really interesting because every morning I wake up and see what the scores are and what happened, and it's always interesting because now 1 to 2 games every single day are always saying PPD, which is short for postponed. So I think the postponement of games is going to be really interesting because um, it's a contact sport, and now that not everyone they're not in the confines of the secure and COVID-free bubble, it's going to be very interesting to see how this impacts the season.
I was thinking about something. What if they were able to somehow create multiple bubbles, right? Like one in Las Vegas, maybe, one in Orlando, one in LA, for example, and they kind of just had tournaments throughout the year where each team would just play their opponents and then they would move on to the next bubble, kind of, and it would make
Oh,
it so that teams wouldn't be moving as much.
like divisional bubbles or something, where for 10 like you play all the games against one division or something like that.
Yeah, like for
But actually, that's
example,
easier said than done because like just the mix and match of all that would be so difficult.
yeah, but I feel like if they're able to create some like an 82 game schedule, I feel like they can use their computers and everything and create the schedule. I mean, obviously it wouldn't be easy, but um,
It's not that easy, is it?
yeah, and obviously the money aspect with all the ticket sales they might be getting and things like that, it's gonna be hard to replicate that. So, but do you think the season's gonna be like? Do you think the playoffs are gonna be extended a little bit at the end of the season to allocate for all these games that are being postponed?
I think it has to be, quite frankly. If it's not, like where else are they going to get this revenue from? We saw the problem happen in the NFL where they've only got one bye week, and then they're trying to make teams play games a lot quicker, get less rest. In the NBA, you don't get a week of rest. You get maybe 2 days, 3 days at the max. So the season's just going to have to be extended to make up for all these games that are being missed.
Yeah, like in the NFL, like the Ravens, they played like 3 weeks in a row where they're playing like on Tuesdays and Wednesdays and stuff because a lot of their players were getting COVID, and it was just a really weird thing because if they had kind of allocated a week extra just to have some games, like maybe like the week 18, but just like the weeks of like the games they missed, it would have been a better situation for them. Um, yeah. What are your thoughts on Kyrie Irving coming back to the Nets and how he's going to impact that team so far in their chemistry?
I honestly don't know because the Nets with James Harden and Kevin Durant, they looked amazing. So I don't know how much Kyrie Irving helps that because I think Kyrie Irving, he's way too talented for this role, but I think his role would be best fit being like a third guy, like a Manu Ginobili really. Like I think Manu Ginobili would be a great term for it, although there's no way I see him like taking a back seat and doing all this. It would be like really perfect if he sort of comes off the bench or leads that second unit in a lot of the ways and does a lot of damage that way because I just I think they're fully saturated in terms of who takes the ball when with Durant and Harden on the ball together. So I mean on the court together. So I just don't see how that happens. And if you throw Kyrie Irving there, that's also another defensive liability that I don't know if you want to have out there
Yeah,
with James Harden and Kevin Durant.
honestly, I feel like James Harden is perfectly capable of running the point guard, and I feel like they should maybe, like, if in a perfect situation, if they were to trade Kyrie for Rudy Gobert, you do that because, um, like, they don't really need the offense as much, to be honest, and
They don't need
their
the offense at
defense.
all.
Yeah, and their defense is looking like not that great so far because their post defense is not there. And if you bring in a guy like Rudy Gobert, who's an excellent post defender, you don't really need the offense, and he's going to be catching lobs anyway from Harden and KD and stuff. So he doesn't have to do too much on the offensive side, and the
I think
defense that he
for
brings is pretty good. So
that's not the best trade scenario because he does make a lot of money. I don't know if you want to commit all that to him. And Rudy
Yeah,
Gobert, you already have Donovan Mitchell, so I don't see what Kyrie Irving, the fit of Kyrie Irving there. But maybe a team that doesn't have as good of a guard, you sort of trade him, and then maybe try to get back some draft capital because you already sold the farm to the Rockets for James Harden. So I think, and maybe not even if you, not even, you don't even need a star rim protector or anything like that. Maybe just get like a bunch of like Robert Covington-esque players, just solid NBA players.
yeah. I think they really threw the ball with that, with adding Jared Allen to the trade because, um, like although it was they're trading for James Harden, Jared Allen would have been a perfect fit with this team to be honest. And DeAndre Jordan just isn't the player he once was. And um, Jared Allen is 22. He's on a pretty good contract. He's not on one of those like first round pick, like top 10 pick contracts where he's going to get like 9 million per year, and he's going to get that huge extension. He's going to be on a pretty good contract going forward, and he's a really good rim protector, and they kind of lost that. So it might hurt them against Anthony Davis and LeBron in the future because they're really gifted inside scorers, and if they end up making it to the finals, that's going to be a really big issue for them. Actually, but another thing I was thinking about was the buyout market, right? Like I feel like every year these super teams, right? They get lucky with buyout market when a team buys out a player and like after the trade deadline and they get these players. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think, but I think I don't know if the buyout market can really be that significant simply on the grounds that these players are getting bought out for a reason. If they're really like significant contenders, I don't see how it fits. Unless you're a team that like desperately needs depth or something, then maybe you go for it. Or unless a very like exigent circumstance where you sort of pick up, a player that's super, that fits your team's needs a lot. I just don't see um, how the buyout market affects you that much. What about you?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe. That kind of makes sense. And um, also some players might not necessarily want to like come to your team. They might go to another team, for example, and you never know like how that can make an impact on like your another team against you. Like for example, if a player wanted to join the Bucks instead of you, if the Bucks were playing better at that point in the season, and you never really know with how the NBA is going to go. We're just kind of making predictions at this point. What are your thoughts on the um, Western Conference and how there's the Lakers and Clippers are kind of just playing way better than any other team at the moment?
So I don't think one interesting thing I saw on ESPN the other day was, um historically, of the teams that have made that are in the playoff bracket right now, about a month, 6 weeks into the season, for whatever, a few weeks into the season, these are the teams that almost all make the playoffs. So for example, last season, two teams, the 7 and 8 seed in the Western Conference, they got eliminated, and then the 8 seed in the, 7 and 8 seed in the Western Conference and 8 seed in the Eastern Conference. Other than that, every other team made the playoffs. Of course, the order changed a little and all that, but everyone made it. That's very interesting if you think about it.
Yeah, and honestly, right now, like if you look at the 8 teams, like it's Lakers, Jazz, Clippers, Suns, Spurs, Trailblazers, Warriors, Grizzlies, and then you have 9 and 10, which are Denver and Dallas. I think the Trailblazers and the Grizzlies are going to end up getting knocked out, and Denver and Dallas are going to come in. And to be honest, being the seventh and eighth seed might not be that great this year, considering you have to play the play-in game, and that might be like a bit of an issue for some of these teams. So the sixth seed and above is really viable, and like we saw in the NFL with that number one seed being more viable this year. I feel like a lot more teams are gonna have to try a little bit harder just to get to the seed that they want to be at. And anyways, if you are the 7 or 8 seed, you're gonna go to like one of the better teams, and you're always gonna lose the first round anyways. So yeah,
So
um,
the thing you said about the first round bye got me thinking right now. What about like a first round bye in the NBA for like the first seed, and then teams 2 through 9 actually play through, or something like that, or 2 through 10 or whatever, and
uh,
it's like a 3 game series or something, maybe, or I don't know.
Yeah, I think that to be honest, I honestly think that only 7 teams should make the playoffs in this league, and um, I think that like on each conference, and I think that the seventh and eighth seed, like the eighth or ninth seed, there can be some kind of play-in tournament for that seventh seed maybe, and it can be kind of like the thing they have in baseball, where like they have the first round and then they actually have like the playoffs, if you know what I mean. And
Like a
if
wild
they're able
card.
to,
Yeah.
yeah, kind of like that, and they're able to kind of replicate that, it'll be kind of cool. And the NBA's got inflamed a lot for like having a lot more teams in the playoffs and the other major sports leagues, and they want to maybe, I don't know if it hurts the revenue, but if the first round bye somehow helps the revenue, then it could work out. But having the first seed playing in the first round, it helps your, in my opinion, it would help your revenue because it makes it so that like the best team is playing and people want to watch like the LeBron play or the when the Warriors really good, the Curry play or whatever, if that makes sense. So the NBA is looking at it from a revenue standpoint.
So with these play-in games, would you rather it be like one game, or maybe like a three-game series or something, like a short mini series?
I think it should be like a 3 game series, but the team that finished with the higher seed should have some kind of advantage. Like maybe the team with the higher seed has to win
Two
only
out of three or something like that, or like three out of three.
yeah, maybe, or if there's a 4 game series, then the team with has to win 2 games instead of winning only, like instead of winning 3, or if that makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense, but something like that. So that there's some incentive in trying to get the seventh or eighth seed, because if the seventh and eighth seed have the same chance as the ninth, or maybe home court advantage, then then that might be an advantage, I guess, that way. So if there's some kind of advantage, then it could work really well. And to be honest, in the conference like the Western Conference right now, where there's a lot of good teams, the playing game is really viable at this point in the NBA because there's some good teams that maybe in the ninth seed and are actually better than the eighth seed, but don't get to make it in. Like last year, if there's a playing game, I think the Suns might have made the playoffs because they were just on a roll, and the Trailblazers weren't that good of a team, and so were the Grizzlies, I think. So, yeah.
So I'm not sure. Um, I think a good thing would be, this is something I've heard a lot. I saw a YouTube video on this. It was about, what about what about a tournament for the number one seed, where all the lottery teams sort of like play it out for a chance to get the number one seed. And I really understand the argument against it, because in a something like European football, what happens is the team with the bigger budget will always win, unless the smaller team can land on like a loyal superstar or something like that, and like develop him ever since he's younger or whatever. And I think this would be a something interesting, because then the ninth seed would have a really easy shot to win, especially if it's someone like the Suns or the Grizzlies, who could be a playoff team, and they they can have an easy shot at the number one overall pick, and they can become very talented very quickly. So, what are your thoughts on this?
I don't really think that'd be that good of an idea. But like I feel like the worst team should probably just get the worst pick, and the lottery is kind of cool. Like the NFL just has it where there's like a set order, but I actually like the lottery because it's kind of based on luck, and it brings people like in and it stirs people up, and makes it so you don't have the guaranteed number one pick. So if you tank, you obviously have a higher chance, but like all three of the bottom 3 seeds have the
Yeah,
same
now
chance,
it's
right?
only 14%.
And
14% is not a lot.
yeah, but yeah, exactly. And it makes like you're pretty much you guaranteed a top 4 pick if you're the first seed, right? Like so you're not gonna get a bad pick, but at the same time,
There's
you're
a
not gonna like
significant drop off in the first and everyone else. So, if just looking at first
in
overall picks,
some
you could
drafts though.
legitimately make a team of, like, if you took a team from any other pick and a team of only first overall picks, it's quite likely that a team of first overall picks could beat the team without any first overall pick.
Yeah, but then like if you look at like this year's draft, for example, that is a good point, but that's just because there's some just insanely generational people like LeBron that went first overall, right? But then
Not even
in
that, just
most
all the best players are on the first overall pick. So
I mean, yeah, but like if you look at a draft like this year, where Lamelo Ball is the best player in the draft, in my opinion, he's not the he's not the first pick, you know. And
But he wasn't the
I
first
mean,
pick
obviously
because of
this draft,
risk. He wasn't the first pick because of risk. You never know with him. He certainly had the highest potential, and he's showing why he's why he deserves to be the best. But again, someone like Anthony Edwards, he was a much safer pick. James Wiseman is even safer than that. So like
yeah,
Lamelo Ball was just super intriguing. You never knew with him.
yeah, exactly. But and also this draft is like one of the more weaker draft classes. Like if you look at the Trey Young and Luca draft, that was like a really insane draft. So much talent across the whole board. Like that was just on another level than this draft. So I mean, your point is kind of significant. So I think it just makes it so that teams can't like completely just do what the Sixers did 6, 7 years ago, where they just
Exactly.
completely like
It
traded
gives you
everything.
motive to stay relevant because if a tournament like this happens, then no team will want to be bad for a year. Like they won't be deliberately trading. Like basically, no team will be doing what the Thunder are doing. Although even though the Thunder look pretty nice this year, they might even be a playoff team. The No team will be doing a thing like that where you just stockpile draft picks. Actually, the Thunder have done it to such an extent that you sort of mitigate the entire risk associated with it because you have so many first round picks. But it really takes away that whole thing of
No,
what
but
happened.
the Thunder. See, the issue with the Thunder kind of doing is they're trading for like first round picks in the immediate future, and they're also trading where they're good players, right? So like these teams, so these teams aren't going to be like bad teams. So the first round picks they're getting aren't necessarily that good, right? Like they have the Clippers picks, but they're all like within till 2025, and the Clippers are probably going to stay like relevant ish until
I know, but
2025.
you're setting yourself up for the future. I think they must have learned from their mistakes of having three straight MVPs and not winning a title, which is really insane if you think about it on a from a historical standpoint. It's just something that with so many draft picks, that insane amount of draft capital is just a safety blanket that prevents you from ever having a situation where you don't like with so many good picks, and the Thunder are pretty good at drafting as well. So even if you don't necessarily hit on the obvious superstars because they get taken in the early first round, you still have a really high chance of getting good and just solid NBA players. And with so many first round picks, you could hit the lottery and maybe get a steal.
Yeah, maybe it's just, and they could also just trade their like if they end up getting like that one dude, like if they end up drafting a one star like in the 13th pick put together whatever, then they can trade a lot of their first for like really good players around him and try to build. And they also have Shea, and obviously Shea's gonna get his like $180 million contract or whatever he's gonna get it within the next few years. So that's just one concern I kind of have because if you're trying to rebuild around like those types of guys, you got to rebuild before they get their huge contracts because after that it just kind of gets hard. Like it's kind of hard to trade them unless they're just at that level where they're kind of worth the supermax like Harden, if that makes sense.
But what about a team like the Lakers and what they did, where they tanked, they rebuilt through the draft, they got good players, and then they signed free agents. Obviously, the biggest name there is, possibly the greatest ever. They signed him. Then instead of giving all these guys giant contracts, just flip him for someone like Anthony Davis. It is the era of like superstar and just in general player empowerment, where they can go to good situations. So why not leverage these situations in order to get good players?
Yeah, I mean that kind of makes sense, but at the same time, you also gotta look at the markets, I guess, and only like maybe 8 cities have a chance of even getting like these types of players through free agency. Like nobody's ever gonna want to sign in Oklahoma unless there's already like a star there. Like if Kevin Durant was still there, maybe a player would want to come play with Kevin Durant, right? But um, you don't really have that luxury. So I guess
Yeah, so
stocking up
you
on
go
draft
through the
picks.
draft, and if you get a really good player, you try and the supermax is a like it's 227 million incentives to stay, right? So
Like like honestly, like what the Nuggets kind of did is what the Thunder maybe are looking for, where they kind of just building this full culture through the draft. And I think the Nuggets also made a few mistakes, like letting Jeremy Grant go this offseason. But if the Thunder could like do better than that somehow, and maybe hit on a pick like the Nuggets did with Jokic, then they maybe are set for the future, you know. And they also have Shai, who's like gonna keep improving. So I don't know how good he'll end up being, but he's decent. So yeah,
I think the three greatest examples of rebuilds done right would be the Lakers, Nuggets, and Celtics. Only one team is usually a championship, but Lakers I already sort of went into what they did. The Nuggets, the Celtics, they got so many young players and they got free agents and all that. I think they should have maybe pulled the trigger and got rid of some of those things, some of those players, and sort of pull the trigger on like an Anthony Davis or someone like that. But they didn't, and
yeah. They also
I think
didn't pull the
the
trigger
Nuggets should do the
on.
same thing. They've already got Jokic and Murray, and maybe you trade with Michael Porter, someone to get that third star, and then you can sort
Yeah.
of win a title.
The, the Celtics also were like that one year where Jimmy Butler and Paul George both got traded. The Celtics were rumored to get both of them, and they just didn't pull the trigger on either of them. And I feel like that might have been a mistake because they picked Kyrie over them. They traded the Brooklyn unprotected pick that was Colin Sexton, and I feel like they honestly it might have been a better option for them to pick up a Paul George or Jimmy Butler and or even an Anthony Davis at that point, and that would have been like that might be a big mistake going forward. But I don't really know because the Celtics team right now, I feel like they're really good, but I don't think they're good enough to win a championship. I feel like they don't have enough depth to like sustain them in the playoffs, and it just doesn't seem like they might need another year or two. But you never know. Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown maybe would just be like maybe are the real deal, and they can beat the Nets and the Lakers. But you never know. You
Yeah,
know? What are your thoughts? I don't really know if you know much, but like, what are your thoughts on like the Jazz? Like they're the hottest team in the NBA right now. I think they're on a 6 or 7 game winning streak. They're just looking really good, and um, they're tied with the Lakers for the first seed right now, actually.
I
So
just I just don't see it honestly. Like I get that you can make the argument that they were like a conference championship type team, like all the way up until the last shot by Mike Conley, which was in and out. They could have beaten the Nuggets, and we all know what the Nuggets did to the Clippers.
and Bojan
And
wasn't playing. Who's like their second
exactly,
best scorer.
exactly. So I get the argument from last season, and I get that, but I think they're a really well built team, but they don't have a superstar player. Donovan Mitchell is nice, but he's not a superstar or anything like that. Rudy Gobert is obviously an overpay, but it's a justified overpay, and especially in the playoffs, he becomes a below average defender in the playoffs simply because he's not as switchable and all that. Where
In the
someone like
playoffs,
Anthony
small ball
Davis,
becomes really big. Yeah, in the
yeah,
playoffs, small
Anthony
ball is
Davis,
just
did you know statistically Anthony Davis was the second best defender of all time last year in the playoffs?
thing. Wait, who's the first? Just
Hakeem
curious.
Olajuwon his 1995 title run.
Oh yeah,
But it just
that's
really
very
shows
interesting actually.
it really goes to show that while the Jazz may have a lot in the regular season, I don't think they're going to have it in the playoffs because again, you go from defensive player of the year, who is that means you're the best defender in the league, to below average. How does that how does that
Yeah,
work?
I honestly, I also think that the Clippers, I feel like they're not as good as the Lakers, but I think they're right now the clear cut second best team because um I feel like they've learned from their mistakes. And this year Paul George, I feel like his mentality has improved. He's shooting 51% from three. Like that's not going to sustain, but he's a 50-50-90 player right now. And I think he can keep the 50-40-90 going on for the whole season because he's shooting really efficiently, and he has the caliber to make those types of shots. He just needs to have the better mentality. And and honestly, they're more talented than other teams. And Serge Ibaka is bringing them that defensive factor that they didn't really have with Montrezl last year. So their post defense has really improved. They have two of the best perimeter defenders in the league. Actually, three with Patrick Beverly. And
I mean,
um,
Jonathan, that's what the eye test says. They must have misplaced that against Jamal Murray and the Nuggets, huh? When he gave them 40, 40, and like 38.
Yeah, last year that's what I was saying. Last year they just underestimated the Nuggets and they just were just thinking about the Lakers. But I feel like this year their like mentality has changed and they're like looking at each game differently than they did last year. And I think they kind of learned from their mistakes. And I'm not saying they're better than the Lakers, but I'm saying that they're the clear cut second best team right now from what I've seen in the league. And
Better than
they're
the
kind of just
Nets.
running through opponents. Oh, actually, not in the league, maybe, but in the West for sure. I think in the league they're a top four team.
Who's the third then? Bucks.
Yeah, I think the Bucks are the fourth, but or the Nets are fourth. I mean the Bucks like I kind of like what I see from Drew Holiday, but again, I don't really know if it's gonna sustain the playoffs. And I think the Sixers and the Celtics are also pretty good, so I don't want to count them out too early. And the Celtics have been having a good year, so you never know. But I think in the West, I think this year's conference finals is even more like simple than last year, even though last year everybody just assumed to be Lakers Clippers. But I think since like the Clippers have kind of learned from their mistakes and the other team is LeBron
I
and
think the
Anthony
Clippers
Davis.
last year they showed to the Nuggets sort of showed the rest of the West that maybe the Lakers and Clippers we can take them down. They're not these almighty they're not destined to meet in the conference finals and have their battle. Like maybe you can interrupt that. I think in the West there's just a lot of teams that could give the Lakers or the Clippers or any contending team a lot of trouble, especially in the first round, like in 5 or 6 games. Now, Lakers look really dominant, so I don't see like I know they just lost yesterday or something, but they're first in net rating, first in defensive rating, like second or third in offensive rating. They're sort of looking like how the Bucks look last year, except we just saw them win the championship, and they've got LeBron James. And when you've got Anthony Davis, who might even be who you could make an argument for as the best player in the game, and he's definitively the second option on your team, it's just a really good place to be if you're the Lakers.
Yeah, yeah, that's just yeah, they're just on another level right now. They're almost as dominant as the Warriors were from like I'm not saying they're as good as a team, but in the current state of the NBA, I think they're almost as dominant as the Warriors were a few years ago, where we kind of just already like know their favorites or like championship winners unless there's like a scare
But what
coming in
about
the East or
Brooklyn?
something. See, see, Brooklyn's like that LeBron where I feel like Brooklyn's gonna be really, really good, but I don't know if Brooklyn can match up in the finals. Like Brooklyn might be able to outscore them a few games, but it's gonna be hard to keep that going for like the whole series. And the Lakers are a way better defending team, and even if Brooklyn has that advantage on offense, I think the Lakers defense advantage, and also the Lakers have so many more players around them, and they also
I
don't have
think the
that
Lakers,
maybe.
the best thing they have is scoring now. They got Schroeder and Harrell, these guys can just score the ball so much that you might not even need LeBron to score. So if you want to put like Anthony Davis on James Harden, which I can legitimately see that happening because James Harden terrorizes
I mean,
normal
they
good
have
wing
Wesley Matthews
defenders.
though,
What?
who's I think they put Wesley Matthews on him, like
You put him
or
on
maybe Wesley
Irving.
Matthews was
You
in
put him on
Kyrie,
Irving. You put him on Irving.
maybe then.
And then if you put LeBron on Kevin Durant, that really sort of limits what he can do on the offensive end. But you don't need him to score that much. If you throw out a lineup of LeBron Davis, Harold Schroeder, and maybe I don't know, and Wesley Matthews or something, you can really you can really punish the Lakers for that. And Anthony Davis would really be the centerpiece because do you put DeAndre Jordan out there? I don't see him matching up with him. Do you put Kevin Durant on him on Anthony Davis? Then
And
who's
James
guarding
Harden has to
LeBron?
guard him,
Who?
and Anthony Davis has such a big height advantage on him that
Exactly, like what you put Jeff Green on him or something. Like you can't rely on Jeff Green to shut down LeBron or
yeah.
Anthony Davis.
Yeah, I think also the Lakers also have like you didn't even mention like Gasol, Kuzma, Caruso.
Yeah,
Like
it's sort of sad that I can like go like the whole way without talking about these incredibly talented guys themselves.
yeah, it's just like they like the fact that Montrezl Harrell like comes off your bench and like you have like a solid like starter above him and then you have Schroeder, you have the best player in the whole game, you have the best defender in the whole game. Like you're just so talented, like you're just so stacked. Like there's just I don't know, just like they're just on another level compared to the rest of the league. And the Nets, like they look really talented on paper, but I just don't know if they're gonna beat LeBron. And LeBron has this motivation since he came to the Lakers where he wants to be Jordan, and I don't think anybody's gonna get in his way
So
unless the Nets end
motivation
up
is
getting
an
more.
interesting factor because, I mean, don't you think that James Harden, Kevin Durant, and all these guys are also motivated? Don't you think Kyrie Irving and Kawhi Leonard and Paul George are motivated? Other than maybe the younger guys, even the younger guys have got a lot to prove, but they don't have that like the clock that they're fighting against also. But don't you think they've also got a problem or something to think of?
I mean, I kind of do, but at the same time, like I think LeBron's just on a whole nother level of motivation, and um, I don't really like for the Nets. I don't really think that Kyrie Irving is that motivated, and he like I saw his interview yesterday. Where he talks about how he just needed a break, and I don't really know if that's like he gets those types of breaks like a few times in the season, and he didn't really play that many games before he needed a break, right? He only played like 5 6 games, and he took a
I mean,
nine
I
game
get the
break
whole
or whatever.
family thing and all that, but like, it didn't seem like there was a family loss or something. You had like a birthday party or something, right?
Yeah, like
And
Carl Anthony Towns. Carl Anthony Towns like
yeah, he
lost
like
like eight
lost
family
family
members, and
members.
he's still
He's
playing.
not missing games because of that.
He
And
even got COVID
you
now,
know,
and now he's actually fine sitting on it. Like it's taken him like he has so much better mentality than um Kyrie, and
yeah, the
I don't know.
perfect example would be last year between bench shooting guards for the Lakers and Clippers. Lou Williams was out at a club and he missed a few seeding games. He did this and that. Meanwhile, Alex Caruso was out there skipping his sister's wedding because he was so focused. When you can usually make the argument, not usually, you probably would say that um you probably would say that um uh Alex Caruso had a smaller role on the Lakers than Lou Williams had on the Clippers. So it's just an interesting contrast. It's like it's just mentality.
Yeah, like having
Like,
LeBron and everything, it's
before I
like the same
continue,
effect
what
as
do you think would be the impact of the leader on them? Because using the example of the Clippers and Lakers, Kawhi Leonard was never there. He lived in a different city. He was always showing up late. He would, he practiced when he wanted to. And then you contrast that with LeBron, who had the ultimate motivation, and he was always like working super hard and doing all these things, playing good defense, even though he's 40 million years old. What do you
yeah.
think is the impact of that?
That's a really big like idea because also if you look at the Miami Heat, who in my opinion just I don't think they were like the most talented team, but they made the finals because Jimmy Butler is a really good leader and they have a culture around him with Eric Spoelstra and Tyler Hero and Bam and Andre Iguodala. They have like that culture that is built around him where they were able to like make it to the finals. And like you see the same thing with the Buccaneers. Buccaneers are obviously really talented, and but you like all their players like they have so much support for Tom Brady, and they're all going for like that ring. And you hear their interviews, they just have so much motivation. And same thing with the Lakers. Um, the Clippers like last year, you never really heard anything. Kawhi's so quiet. He just doesn't really bring that leadership. Like their leader was Patrick Beverly, and honestly, like you got to be like the most talented player, second most talented player has to be your leader. And um, Patrick Beverly, like as good of a leader as he could be, I don't think like he's the Jimmy Butler or LeBron where he has that mentality.
I mean, Patrick Beverly should not be your leader. That's somewhat concerning, because his production simply doesn't justify it. You can't have a. At the end of the day, he's a good role player. A good role player should not be your leader. Your leader has to be your
Yeah,
best player, or if not your best player, someone like Draymond Green, who's still a really integral part of your team.
yeah, exactly. Like it has to be like or a veteran, right? It has to be like a guy that has the experience or is really
Like a
talented that
championship
justifies
pedigree or
it.
something like that, where everyone listens to
Yeah,
him.
yeah, and
The Clippers sort of have
um,
that. Kawhi Leonard is a veteran. He is a champ. He does have championship experience and all that. So
but like, but you hear all these stories about all the Clippers players that thought it was unfair that he's getting all these perks. He has private security guards. He's getting this money from extra money from the Clippers to sign with them. Like, it's like there was like investigations
Yeah,
going
all these
around,
things that they didn't
all that
get.
stuff. Like imagine being a Montrezl hero, like, and seeing all this stuff from like Kawhi. I think that's a big impact on like him going to the Lakers and seeing how LeBron kind of. LeBron's also, I think LeBron's also a nice big guy. I don't know if like LeBron just seems like he's more friendly to his teammates. He invites them for dinner. Like he's
Things like
the type
that.
of guy
Yeah,
that
I don't see Kawhi
humble.
Leonard even talking to his teammates that much.
Yeah, I feel like Kawhi just treats basketball like work. He comes, he plays, goes back home. Like LeBron
He's
treats it
sort of like
like
a really
life.
individual guy. Like he's sort of okay. I'm gonna do my part, and that's gonna be it.
Yeah, like, and LeBron like shouts out his teammates on social media. He's such a great like person, and he's a good father. Like everything you see from him is it's always positive. Like he's just so much of a better person that way, I guess.
So
But
what do you think about what do you think about the impact of um, the impact of like a postseason bubble? How do you think that'll work this year with more teams being
um,
invited and all that?
I mean, I think they should. I I don't really know if they're gonna do a postseason bubble, but if they were to, I think it would be pretty similar to last year. But to be honest, like last year's playoffs, like I watched the finals and stuff, but it seemed a little bit boring. Like, and also the viewership was really low, and without fans and without being at your home stadium, I think it kind of lowers the NBA's revenue and relation, like, and viewership and everything. And I think
No, I don't
like
think that's what happened. I think the main thing that happened was everyone was at home and you could stream it and do things like that. Everyone was already like at that point everyone was already like sort of adjusted to life at home, and they were easy to they were ready to do all this and all that. So
yeah, but I also feel like I don't know. To me, like I was reading like a lot of stuff online, and a lot of people said they lost a lot of interest this year in the finals in comparison to last year. And I don't really understand why. I don't know if it's because the Heat just aren't as entertaining as another like other finals, or maybe you already thought the Lakers would just win. Like I don't know what it is, but I felt like a lot of people just weren't as
maybe the
interested
marquee
in.
matchups weren't there, like LeBron versus Giannis or LeBron versus Steph and LeBron versus Kawhi and all that. Durant.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like a LeBron versus KD, there just wasn't any of that.
Exactly. KD
Like it
wasn't there.
was,
Steph wasn't there. Harden isn't
and to be
really
honest,
that.
like nobody actually really expected the Heat to win. It was like even that year where LeBron like kind of made it to the finals and there was like nobody in his team. Like people had a slight sliver of hope that LeBron, even if there's not hope, people think there's gonna be entertaining games where LeBron's gonna drop like 45, 10, and 8, and they're gonna lose by 4 or something like that. But in that series, it just like I honestly expected a sweep. Like I don't know, the Heat are a good team, but matching up against the Lakers with two players that are better than your best player and having the GOAT, in my opinion, it just didn't seem like it would be like a good series. I mean, I like if that makes sense.
I think it would have been a good series, even if the Lakers were dominant and beat them in five or something. It still would have been really like fun to see that because that was the marquee matchup of the whole NBA. It wasn't LeBron Giannis. It wasn't LeBron versus the Warriors. It was the Battle of LA, and that would have been interesting.
Yeah.
So, do you have anything else you
Um.
want to talk about?
Oh, not really per se. One thing I wanted to talk about was what do you think like also just about um like Harden and Kevin Durant's chemistry so far? Because to me, it seemed like they have some kind of chemistry. Like I don't know if they're friends behind the scenes or what, but they just seem like they've been hitting it off as of late, and Harden
So I
has been
think
cheering
they
him
sort
on
of
and
have to,
everything.
keep up appearances, and they both have to show we can be team players and things like that. And they're extra motivated by the scrutiny that the media is putting under them. They've both got tremendous pressure to win the championship, particularly James Harden. He's never done that. He's been called the ball hog, not a team player, and all that. So I wouldn't be surprised James Harden is putting his best foot forward to show to the media and his teammates and everyone else. And we're not even talking. We can't. That team isn't KD and Harden. It's also Kyrie Irving. He's the third wheel, and that's the third spoke in the wheel. So you never know what he can bring to the table.
Yeah. I think yeah. Is there anything else you want to talk about, or
No, not really.
all right? Thank you for listening to the Mentorship podcast. Mentorship podcast. I'll catch us in the next episode.